7. The Rifles Regiment had been the crucial factor in winning control of the fort, so Colonel Grant of the South Essex had told them. Once the French had been secured as prisoners and Grant's light and heavy divisions had taken possession of one of Napoleon's strategic posts, the 95 THS and 60 THS had been invited to stay. Brandy and good food were in the offing, so, without much deliberation, Major Sharp agreed that they should overnight at the fort before returning to camp. Far from his mind had been the information from the traitor Bertha, who had shown her true colors that night by fleeing with some escaping French, and it was only when they had got to camp, destroyed and deserted as it had been, that her words were made real to him. She had done this, while they had been away, she had let in these red-coated men, she killed or allowed to be killed some of the women to make it look like a real ambush, then she had come after them. These were the words that Sharp had spoken to Captain Frederickson several hours later, when the camp had been rebuilt and the men disposed to tidying, mending, cleaning. Throughout, Frederickson looked impassive, thoughtful. "And, where are the women?" Sharp said to himself as he inspected the work which was being done. It was at that point a wail went up. Anders Schmidt had found the bodies of his wife and child. "Where are the women?" he asked aloud, before turning to one of the 95th. "Look, Perkins, look for the women, look for their bodies, and when you have looked, if you find nothing, look again." Harris had gone with Perkins and a full 2 hours later they returned. "Not here, sir," Harris reported. Sharp nodded, grimly. "As I suspected." "Yes, sir." "That traitorous woman. Rebecca Haycock." Harris, then, ignoring Matt Harris's look of shock at his commander's description of his friend, shouted it to the heavens, to the camp, that Rebecca Haycock, who they had known as Tom Wright, had caused this, caused it deliberately, and she was even more traitorous than her father. He might have said more, but Frederickson touched him gently on the arm. But the knowledge had been shared and that could not be undone. The doleful camp continued with their work, and the camp and Perkins and Harris were sent once more to search for women. 88,888,888. It was nearly morning when Tom had finally got within sight of the camp. When she had got as far as she dared, and chanced upon a stream which would become the river by which they were camped, only then did she dismount and let the horse rest. She too rested, the night being fine to sleep out of doors, and the summer's early morning rays crept finger-like over the horizon and gently caressed her cheeks. Tom remounted the horse and trotted gently now, still exhausted from the battle and ride, to Ducos's camp, and her mind drifted to the welcome she would receive when she got back to camp. She had told Sharp about the jacket already, and had warned him about the attack. She now had information about Ducos and the camp, and the man's planned discreditation of the Major's name for the murder that he himself had committed. So it was with utter shock that, when she called out to her old comrades as she entered the Rifles encampment, that they raised their load rifles and drew on their bayonets. Tom wearily showed hers. It was meant as a show of identification, but started when the rifles clicked, and those bearing them gathered in front of her to prevent her progress. Tom sighed and cocked hers too. "I need to see the Major," she said, noticing Harris, whose face was not one of friendly welcome. "You'll get none here," growled Harry Heap, a veteran 60th, rivaling Dan Hagman in years. "Not you, traitor woman." "No. No." They all began to shout together, jeering at Tom and crowding around the horse, which whinnied through fright. Tom felt her heart beat into her neck and mouth. What was happening? Why were they being so hostile? A shot was fired from the crowd of riflemen, which was now more resembling a mob, and, just as Tom was beginning to think they were going to attack her, Harris shouldered his way forward and pulled her off the horse, gripping her arm. "Come with me," he instructed Tom, loud enough for everyone to hear, waving his rifle at anyone who was now pointing loaded rifles at her. Sharp was asleep in the officer's tent, which had been reassembled, like the rest of them, but to Tom did not seem quite right. Bowls of different sizes made the roof slope and the fabric at the side was torn. She made to say something, but Matthew shook her hard by the arm. He then crossed over to the sleeping Major and woke him up. "Harris?" he said, half sleepily, half abruptly. This had better be good. Matt Harris did not answer. Instead, he threw at Tom towards him. "Roberta?" he shouted, pulling himself up off the blankets which had been fashioned into a makeshift bed, bearing down on Tom. "I need to speak to you, Major," Tom began, excitement at the telling in her mind. They would be able to do something, stop the attacks, maybe even stop Dugo's. "It's about," but Sharp interrupted her, slapping down the rifle in her hands and stalking over to her. "Well, I am astonished," said Sharp, contemptuously. "You have the gall to come back here after what you did?" Tom felt her eyes widen. "What I did? Don't play the innocent with me, woman, 'cause it won't." Washington. He grabbed her by both shoulders and shook her hard. "The attack. The women. Where are they, then?" "They haven't come back?" asked Tom, in astonishment, fear now beginning to spread in her mind. "No, they damned well haven't!" exclaimed Sharp, harshly. "But, can the dead rise up, eh?" "Dead? But again he cut her off. "Now you've come to protest your innocence after you let the enemy in here to do this? Well, I'll tell you, if they did come back, at least that might be one thing. Stop you from swinging at any rate." Tom's face froze, its features fixed. "Swinging? Hanging?" "Aye," shot back the Major, pushing her away. "Where are they, then?" "I sent them up the river. I know there's a cave up on the bank, about 100 yards up on the right." "Well, that's a mercy," he replied, quieter now. "Harris? Go there. Take Perkins with you." Harris saluted and was gone. "Where?" she began. But at THST moment the tent was pushed aside. In strode Harper, towering like a cliff, as if seabirds and storms were flying about him. When he saw Tom, he strode over to her and seized her by the red jacket, which he tore off, throwing it onto the floor, grabbed the dress his wife had once given to her, holding her from the ground. Tom's protesting arms were useless as the sergeant bellowed into her face, "Where is my wife?" And, when she couldn't answer, for the strength of the grip, added, "I'll break your treacherous little neck for you, so help me I will." "Put her down, Pat," groaned Sharp, defeated. "The women are in a cave upriver. They're safe." "She sent 'em there," he added, when the grip on Tom began to send her purple. She shook her head when Harper reluctantly let go his hands from Tom's throat. She crumpled onto the ground. "Why did you flee, eh?" asked Sharp, staring at her. "Those men," she panted, "they attacked the camp. I tried to stop them, but there was too many of them. They attacked the women. They killed Mrs. Schmidt. They left, and I shot one of them. I took his horse and followed them." "Or," said Sharp, "you planned the attack to go with them to the fort?" "I fought," insisted Tom. "You saw me at the fort. I saw you ride with them. They have a crate of red jackets. They are the same as this one, the same as the one I showed you. I told you to wait." Tom hung her head. "Yes. Then, I saw them getting away. I knew I had to find out why. I followed a colonel who drove a chariot here. His name was Melliot. I was trying to shoot him for it. I hid. I heard General Calvert talking about something. But, they spoke in French and Spanish. I couldn't understand what they said. Melliot escaped, with the others. But, it wasn't the same man. The man they called Melliot who raided here was not Calvert's Melliot. When I followed them, I saw the Melliot from the fort, Henri Melliot." "All this is very interesting," cut in Sharp, coldly. I say, that you were sent here to tell this pretty tale to cover up what you did here. Henri Mailliot was murdered by a Major Ducis, sir, interrupted Tom, insistently, ignoring Sharp's assertions. I saw him. And I heard him plotting something. He said that everyone should know that Henri Mailliot was murdered by Richard Sharp. And how the hell did you know he said that, if you don't speak French or Spanish, eh? Roared Harper, exultant at having found a weakness in her argument. Aye, replied Sharp, bitterly, 'tis what I knew, Pat, he said. Because, he said it in English, Tom replied. He had a scribe write it down. But, if you don't believe me, I cannot help that. I'll go, she added. You step out there and now I say we'll stop those men from killing ye, said Sharp. They know what you are and who your father is. Best stay here and confess the truth to me, here and now. That is the truth, Tom replied, hotly. Major Ducos seems to be asking Colonel Mailliot to do something for him, something about gold. When he refused to do what had been asked of him, Ducos shot him in the chest. He said, make it known that Colonel Henri Mailliot was murdered by Major Richard Sharp in a cowardly act to save his own life. Sharp looked at Harper. Clearly Ducos meant something far deeper to him than an enemy name, Tom thought. And you swear this? He picked the jacket that Harper had torn from her up from the floor. They wore those, they were French, Spanish, all under the command of Ducos. Ducos, repeated Sharp, sullenly, then shot her a look. The Frenchman who instructs you? No, sir. I have never seen him before last night. And these redcoats were at the fort? Yes, nodded Tom. And you thought you'd wait around there? It doesn't look good, girl. I meant to kill him, sir, Tom replied. I had to do something when the South Essex came. You saved Captain Frederickson's life. Somewhat I am sure he is grateful of, Sharp muttered. You joined in the attack. The 60th OU Summit, at least. Maybe me, too. My men, Tom thought to herself, my comrades. The 60th. A year she had spent with them and now, within days, the life she knew was over. Her heart began to beat so much she could feel it in her ears. Harper, get the Provost Marshal, Roberto Haycock. Yes, sir, growled Harper, staring at her, coldly. Let it be known that she is under my protection until this matter is resolved. When P.M. Espley arrived, Tom went with him. Sharp was to remain in the officer's tent and she in his. Tom had thought she would be in the arrest tent, but the major said that it would be seen that he presumed her guilty of treachery to the French, and he wanted evidence to that effect. Tom said that he would never find any, for there was none, and at that, Sharp pushed her out into the encampment. At once, the men outside raised their rifles, but there were not as many as had confronted her when she had arrived, Tom noticed. But, to her sadness, they were all 60th. When one of them cocked what could only be a loaded rifle, Sharp shouted at them all. Listen to me, this matter is under investigation by me, no man will lay a hand on this person. The women are said to be safe, Harris and Perkins are on their way to get 'em. Then, Sharp took Tom by the shoulder of Ramona's now ruined dress and led her firmly towards his own tent. They passed by Anna Schmidt's body, and her little child, who had been placed in her arms. Tom recoiled. She couldn't save the woman, she told herself. She had been firing at the men on the chariot, at the man they had named Mailliot. But that line of logic did not make her feel any better. In year ago, growled Sharp. The Provost Marshal will guard you, have no fear. And, as he turned, Tom was sure he muttered under his breath the name, Ducos.